I will put on the recording and please, you can start.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Anders Borgen. I'm a plant breeder in Denmark. I work mainly with cereals. I started as an organic farmer many years ago in 1983. But for the past 10, 15 years, I've been working mainly with plant breeding for organic farming. And today I will focus on the impact of on diversity on agricultural systems. Now I should see how this works. There should be a way to change pictures here.
Yeah, there was an arrow down.
Yes, that disappeared. I'm sorry for that.
The keyboard. Yeah, now. Try these several arrows, but most likely that will go to the end. It seems very strange.
Yeah, but it's white.
Yeah, it's still white, yes.
I cannot explain. I'm really sorry about that.
Now we can see at least the last. Yeah, now we can see the first. And if you, and try to click there on the side. Yeah. Good. Then, now it's functioning.
Then it will not be a slideshow, it'll just be the slides. But anyway, the diversity of our plants is decreasing, and that creates a problem. And it's everywhere. It's not. We are talking so much about biodiversity, the loss of biodiversity, and that's not only tigers and Amazon jungles. That's also diversity in agricultural systems. And since agriculture is so dominating on in the world, then this creates a problem. You can't see all of it. We have a lot of plants that we could eat, but actually we are only eating very few of them. And that is, of course, when agriculture was introduced 10,000 years ago, we decreased the number of plants that we were actually eating. And now we mainly eat domesticated plants. And actually it is only these very few plants like maize, rice, wheat, potatoes, a few others, soybean, that actually contribute with almost all our energy and protein supply. And only a few other crops is like spices, but they don't really contribute to human nutrition. That is a problem for our nutrition, but it's certainly also a problem for the diversity in nature, and therefore for the biodiversity at a global scale. And that in agriculture, it is a problem with decreasing diversity. I have here a few examples. You probably all heard about in Ireland when late blight started in Europe. There was a huge famine in Ireland because everybody in Ireland was growing only one potato variety, and that's the lumber potato, and that was very susceptible to late blight. So when this late blight, the disease, fungal disease, was introduced to Europe, all of the plants died at the same time because they were all susceptible to the same plant, to the same disease. So every time you decrease diversity, you are more in a risk of epidemic plant diseases. So that also after the Green Revolution, when new varieties were introduced, especially in South Asia, that new diseases like bacterial leaf blight and also viruses in the late 60s and 70s. Suddenly there was this epidemic of plant diseases and pests that has not been seen really in that scale before, as a result of decreasing diversity. I'm not saying that the Green Revolution was a disaster altogether, but it did make the agricultural system more vulnerable to epidemic diseases. And we still see that today, even after a lot of plant breeding with resistant varieties, and that also later we can we see that, for example, in with yellow rust at the moment. In 2009, at least all organic farmers, but certainly also conventional farmers, were faced with yellow rust in triticale and also in wheat, but especially in triticale because the genetic diversity within triticale is very narrow, and therefore all of them were susceptible to the same races of the fungus. So we see that again and again, that when we decrease diversity, we increase the risk of epidemic, continental and even pandemic epidemics of plant diseases. And that has been, especially after the Green Revolution, but the Green Revolution was had already taken place in Europe at that time. For example, in Sri Lanka, before the Green Revolution, they were growing about 2,000 different varieties of rice. Most of them were land races. That means land races with a high genetic diversity. And after the Green Revolution, they were only growing 100 varieties in Sri Lanka, and most of them were actually sister lines from the same breeding program. Most of them from CIMMYT, but also a few from private companies. So there is really a significant decrease in diversity in farming. So now, why can't you see this? I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it's strange.
It is strange.
But I can nearly read it from here.
Yeah, you can. You need if you can't see it, if it's really on a, if you see it on the mobile phone, you can't see it. Now it disappeared again. The reason for this decreasing diversity is both economic and legal. Of course, a breeding company cannot maintain a lot of different varieties. There is a limit as to how many varieties a seed company can maintain and sell. I'm sure also a Finnish seed company would like to have 1, 2, 3, maybe up to 4 or 5 different varieties of wheat. They don't want to market 100 varieties of wheat in Finland. So they select the highest yielding so therefore the number of, this is really strange. So the number of seed companies actually has an impact on the number of varieties that are available for the farmers. I really don't understand this. Where is my presentation?
It may be that it's zoomed and then it disappears. So maybe, I don't know, it may be that it must go back to this original size that it was in order to be able to see it. But that's also strange anyway.
Yes.
Maybe you can maybe just close it and open it again. Perhaps it then will come now.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we can see it. Yeah, now it functions.
Yeah. Coming back to this, that the number of seed companies actually has an impact on how many varieties is available, and that has changed very much in recent years. It also has an impact who is actually doing the breeding. In some countries, plant breeding is mainly from public institutions, universities, or public breeding stations. I think also you have mainly in Finland and Estonia, it's public breeding. In America, they have both public and private breeding. Canada, mainly public breeding. In Denmark, we only have private breeding. So there is no breeding at universities. We don't even have a professor in plant breeding in Denmark. So there's a huge difference from country to country who actually owns the breeding. But it's also about if it is private breeding, who actually owns the breeding companies. At the moment, most breeding companies is actually owned by agrochemical companies, and that is normally financed by a royalty to the breeding company based on how much seed is actually sold to the farmers. So that means it's more profitable to have a few varieties on a big scale rather than a lot of varieties fitting for different conditions in agriculture. These so often if it is a chemical company or owning the breeding, I wouldn't say they really have the same aim of the breeding than actually the consumers or the farmers or even society. They may have an aim of increasing their gross profit, which is often mainly the pesticides. There's been a lot of discussions with Monsanto and things, breeding actually not for the sake of the farmers, but breeding to increase the use of Roundup, that they can actually earn their money from that. So when you see how the global seed market is actually constructed, at the moment only 4 companies control 60% of commercial seed sale in the world. So when you go to a supermarket buying some seed, there's a 60% chance that it is owned by one of these 4 chemical companies. And that may be a political problem, but we see that in all sectors of society, in banks and toys and food and everything. So plant breeding is not different from that. And I'll not talk about the political issues here, but it has an impact on genetic diversity in farming, therefore on biodiversity, and therefore also on environment and sustainability in society. And that's my issue here. Another thing that constrains the diversity is the seed legislation. There is in the seed legislation from EU, but also for based on that is the UPOV. They have a requirement that when you sell a variety, especially on wheat, barley, and oat, it must be genetic uniform. So there's no room for genetic diversity within each variety. So that means when varieties, when the number of varieties are decreasing, then also the genetic diversity is decreasing. There are some new opportunities in the new EU regulation on organic farming, because organic bred varieties must have some degree of genetic diversity, and we are negotiating now on the delegated act that should implement the organic varieties. And there is also a possibility of heterogeneous plant propagation material that certainly must have genetic diversity. So there is these two possibilities of increasing diversity. It could either be a diversity in number of varieties, that means between crop variety diversity, but that's expensive. As I explained, the companies don't want to market a lot of varieties. They prefer to have the best selling varieties. But it could also be within crop diversity, and that has been my focus in my breeding. So when we look at agriculture, organic farming today, we have some problems that are not covered in the conventional breeding programs. That is resistance to seed-borne diseases. That has been a big part of my scientific research, but also things like weed competition. We have decreased the plant height, but also the vigor, the early season vigor, that has a big impact on weed competition. And in organic farming, we have a lot of problems with protein content, that the conventional varieties does not have enough protein to meet a baking quality. And we also have the problems that we have actually very few varieties available that are fit for organic farming. So when the resistance of these varieties break down due to changes in virulence in the pathogens, we lose varieties, and that's a problem when we have only few varieties. So for organic farming, it would be better to have more resilience. That means more durable resistance. And we also have many crops where we don't have any varieties that are fit for organic problems, for organic conditions. This is just to say, just to tell you where I am. I'm sitting here. So it's quite south of Finland, at the level of Riga, something like that. So we have a very coastal, mild climate, mild winters and cold summers. So that may impact my breeding. First, I'll come back to the weed competitions just to illustrate the Imperial is an old variety, but just showing what has happened from the old varieties to the modern varieties, that they have been shorter. Not so much in the plant height at maturity, but first of all, the plant height in the early development stage. And that is what impacts the weed competition. So in my breeding for new organic varieties, I prefer this type rather than this type in the early development. Here I've shown you the problems with protein. We have the protein content out here and the yield up here. And you see the high yielding varieties have low protein content, and the high protein content we only find in low yielding varieties. That it's like that in all varieties in conventional and organic farming. But the problem is that the VCU requirement, that means the requirement for having a variety approved for commercial sale, the requirement is that they have a better yield than the existing varieties. So you can see here, these are a selection of conventional varieties, and the red ones are organic varieties bred for organic conditions. And what we can see here is that none of the conventional varieties have enough protein for baking quality. They are all below these 10% protein, and that's not enough to make decent bread out of it. The other thing is that none of the organic varieties have a high enough yield, because you have to have low yield if you want to have a high protein content. So it's not legal to market varieties that has such a low yield and high protein content. I think I did not include conservation varieties here, but most likely most of the conventional conservation varieties would be in this area. That means close to the regression line, but with low yield and high protein content. So what we are trying here in organic plant breeding is to get above the regression line, to have high protein content, but as high yield as possible. There are different ways to increase the resilience, that means the durability of the resistance. You can either have many genes, many resistance genes in the same variety, or you can have instead of monogenic resistance, you can have polygenic resistance. That means horizontal resistance. That is difficult to work with in plant breeding, but it is possible, and especially with modern technologies like genomic selection or marker-assisted selection, it is actually possible to increase the number of resistance genes in the varieties and therefore have a more durable resistance. But it's difficult, and it's expensive, and for me and other more or less primitive plant breeders, the technology is often not available. For some diseases, we don't even have the genetic markers for it. We can then also use variety mixtures. That means taking a few varieties with known resistance and put them together. But what I try to do is to increase, not to have approved varieties, just a few, but a lot of different breeding lines put together with different resistance genes and with these different traits altogether, and thereby increasing the diversity within each single crop. I also have some diversity in in my breeding, so it's not only wheat and oat. I do naked barley and lentils and tritorium, millet. I work with many different crops, but I would say that most of it is wheat and wheat for baking. Oh. I'm a plant breeder, but we have now created a membership organization because my problem is the marketing of the varieties, especially when varieties are not officially approved. That is a problem to the seed legislation. But if we can keep it in a closed circle within an organization, then it's not really seed sale, and then we have some more opportunities. I also do some of the marketing by saying that I'm not selling seed to farmers. I'm only selling seed for the farmers to try if these organic varieties fit their conditions. So it's small samples, and it's only for trial production. And trials research is exempted from the seed legislation. So it's legal to sell a non-authorized, non-certified seed for trial, for the purpose of trial. And then if the trial is successful at the farmer, then he can legally propagate his own seed. And therefore, so in this way, we can actually come by the legal constraints in the seed legislation. So this organization, Landsorden, the way it works is that you buy a membership of the organization, and then you have access to the varieties, and the organization also give logistic support for the production of home-saved seed. So this is, the idea is that this is the way it should work. And this is just a few pictures of my facilities. I do some, of course, a lot of trials, field trials with different varieties. And we do have some winters in Denmark. It's not very much, but some we have. This is a few years ago in my neighbor field. I don't have my own field, so I rent field from other organic farmers from year to year. This is from this year, our winter wheat trials. Naked oat, no, yeah, naked winter oat, is it? And this is the seed facility. So the idea is that these trucks drive from farm to farm to clean the farmers' home-saved seed. And that is what I have prepared for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we can start to take questions, and you can write in the chat, and I could start, as there is not any questions yet, that this mobile seed cleaning facility, is it, who is owning that, like?
It's a private company. So it's just a cooperation between this private company and me. They have, I think they have 13 trucks driving around all over Denmark, helping farmers with their home-saved seed.
Okay. And is there something similar also in Sweden and Norway?
I think it is available in most countries in Europe.
Okay, I haven't heard about it in Finland, so if somebody knows about this and the Finnish situation, you could also write in the chat about that so we know about it, but I have not heard. It seems very good, so to say. What about this packaging of seeds then? As you are not selling seeds, you are only selling for field trials, then do you have to package the seed due to some kind of packaging law?
No, since well, of course, the normal packaging law only is only applicable for official sale, but this is not official sale, so I can more or less do the packaging as I please. And since it's only for trial, but how much is a trial? That's a debate. Our definition is that it is a trial is to fill up a sewing machine, and modern sewing machines, they can have 2 tons, can't they? So 2 tons is also a trial production.
Okay, then Magnus is asking about organic breed varieties. How do you see about their genetic uniformity according to the new coming regulation?
Well, we don't really know there are these 2 different categories. There are the heterogeneous plant propagation material. That's not a variety. That's a type of seed that you can buy, and that is certainly diverse. The organic bred variety, it's a bit strange because it says in the legislation that it should meet the requirement, which is uniformity, but at the same time it should include diversity. But it doesn't specify in detail how much diversity. And since it is since it's not meeting the requirement for the seed legislation, we don't really know how much diversity can be in the organic bred varieties. So I'm skeptical that it will work. I will use it if it is, if I can. And it will be implemented in 2022. So it's only in a few years. So I hope it will work. But if it doesn't work, then I will just continue as I do now. Then we will not then we will do it. It's not illegal, but it's outside of the law.
Okay. Something more?
Yeah, Irma Tang from Estonia. Do you have some land sorten in grown in farm yet of grain seeds?
Yes, I mainly focus on organic bred varieties, but we have also conservation varieties in our program. I think the conventional, the conservation variety has a role to play. Often, conservation varieties are grown because they have a higher protein content, and therefore they can actually provide decent baking quality even under low input conditions. So that's, I think, the reason that we started with conservation varieties. We grow, for example, in Denmark, a lot of Ölands wheat, selected by Hans Larsson. Also some varieties from Dalarna in Sweden. But we also have Danish conservation varieties that we grow in Denmark. But my opinion is that I would prefer to have organic bred varieties because they have better resistance to diseases and a better cropping, better traits, better agronomic traits. So I hope I can do better than both conventional varieties and better than land races. But sometimes we don't have new varieties, and then sometimes the conservation varieties are better under organic conditions than the conventional varieties.
Could you say also some few words about your work with soot? And I don't know, you have also been working with nematodes and getting resistance against them, but mostly with soot, I think.
Yeah, you mean common bunt in wheat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Common bunt.
Yeah, it's one of these seed-borne diseases that most varieties are susceptible to the seed-borne diseases, and that's not often it's not a problem if you grow conventional varieties in a conventional systems, and then in the last 2 years you grow them organically. Then it's normally not a problem. Because then you rely on the pesticides that are used in the conventional propagation of the varieties. But if you turn into a permanent organic system where you grow the organic seed every year without seed treatment, then you come with problems to seed-borne diseases, and certainly with a common bunt in wheat, since it is very devastating and the threshold is very low. So that's why in my breeding program, I include resistance to common bunt in all my varieties, because I think this particular disease is so devastating that we cannot accept common bunt in organic farming.
Then Magnus is asking about rust how is the situation with plant diseases changing in Denmark, and is this rust an old problem?
Yes, rust is a disease. It's very different from common bunt. Rust comes with spores from long distances. The Danish rust mainly comes from England or even Ireland, coming with the wind. So that means rust is more or less a continental disease, and it changes all the time because rust is part of nature. So there is a huge genetic diversity in the rust population in nature. So every time we changes crops in Europe, then the rust will adapt to the new varieties with the new genes. So therefore, in conventional farming, a wheat variety or a barley variety is only on the market in 3 or 4 years. Then the resistance breaks down because of rust or mildew. And that's part of that's how genetic works, but it's also how the economical situation works. That it's actually an advantage for the plant breeders that the farmers need to change varieties every 5 years, because then they are sure that they will buy the newest varieties, and so keeping them as customers to the company. So what we do in organic plant breeding is that we don't rely on only one single resistance gene, but we include this huge amount of different resistance genes and have the resilience of the crop, the resistance of the crop is not based on one very effective gene. It's a more a population structure where with a lot of minor genes and a lot of different resistance genes that can control the plant diseases. And in that way, it's more durable, so we don't need to change varieties every year.
Magnus still asks that how you look on seeds from different origin, for example, different countries. I think it was related to this in your breeding program, and perhaps to this, how you choose cereals for your breeding program.
Well, it's very different. Most of my breeding has focused on resistance to common bond, and then different traits so I have selected resistant varieties, and I don't really care where they come from. It can be from gene banks, or it can be from modern breeding programs. I'm just interested in the trait, and then I cross it with the varieties that have the good agronomic traits, and in this way I develop my populations and breeding lines. So my main population of bread wheat now, they have traits from all kind of sources. It can be exotic sources, or it can be old conservation varieties from gene banks. And but I also go, and sometimes we have to go to gene banks and breeding programs or land races to find the traits that we are looking for, because they are no longer, or they have never been in the conservation in the modern conventional varieties. But of course, if you take traits from a land race from Ethiopia or something like this, then you need a certain number of back crosses into adapted varieties in order to have high yielding crops in our condition.
Okay, some more questions. I actually was interested in this nematode problem also.
Yes, we have in oat and barley, we consider cereal cyst nematodes as a very serious problem. So all barley varieties from Denmark, they have resistance to nematodes. But they don't go only on oat and barley, they also go on spring wheat. And since we did not have any breeding program for springweed in Denmark until recently, then all the varieties that are available in Scandinavia, they are susceptible to nematodes. And we see it again and again that farmers that grow a lot of springweed, and especially now that we no longer have nematode resistance in oats. So if you have a crop rotation with a lot of spring crops, then you get problems with nematodes. So therefore I try to breed for nematode resistance in springweed. It will take a few years more, but I hope I'm on the way.
And Magnus also asks, nowadays breeders don't have to report to public what their new varieties are based on, at least so it is in Finland. What do you think about this?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it? I didn't understand.
That the nowadays breeders do not have to report to the public what the new varieties are based on. So when you do a new variety, you don't have to report from where it was the background material.
Yeah, it would be nice to know, but actually often we don't know. Either we don't know, or we think we know, and then it turns out to be wrong. If you look in the official papers of the variety Hereward, it's an English breadwheat variety, the most grown breadwheat variety in England in the past 50 years. What it contains of genes does not come from the parents. So it's obvious the parents that they say in the papers cannot be the parents. It must have been a mistake in the breeding company, because it just doesn't contain the genes that the parents have. And that's also what I see in my own breeding, that yes, I may have made a cross between two varieties, and then it turns up that it has a completely other resistance gene. It must have been from the neighbor field. So they are plants, they are just as unfaithful as our wives and husbands. So even you have requirement to tell who the parents are, often it's not true. And I think the problem will solve itself within 5 years, because then we have so many markers and genetic information that we can see on the varieties where they come from and which parents are actually included in the crossings.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, when it gets more cheap. Then still one more. Magnus wants to say thank you for the samples that he got from Agrologica on the winter wheats with resistance against common blunt for trials. And they have now about 2 leaves and some of them 3rd leaf coming. Okay.
Yes,
so that's that's
thank you for your questions, Magnus.
Okay, so I think that if we don't have any more questions now, then we say thank you to Hannes, and we will take now a small break on 5 minutes, and then we will be continuing at 25. So 25 minutes past. In Finland, it will be 25 minutes past 1, and in Denmark, 25 minutes past 12. So 5 minutes a break.
Okay, thank you.